John, so you've got two people that are close. And as Fran said earlier, that's getting more and more the case, where you've got two, sometimes even three, very close candidates. The selection, the interview panel has given you their input. They've given you their perspective on each candidate, and so, but you still walk out of that room at the end of the day as the hiring manager with maybe two people. Fill us in on what happens then. How do you get to that final person? What does it sometimes come down to?
Well, in most cases, when you go for an interview and you've gone through the process, you don't want to wait 2 weeks to find out what the outcome is, and we don't want to wait 2 weeks either. But understand that a little bit of time at the end helps. What I would generally do, trust that I think I can speak for all of us, we will have done our homework up front. We're going to get a big old list of candidates. They're going to go through the screening process. We're going to narrow it down to a number that we're going to interview. And we're going to do our homework. We're probably going to call and talk to your manager, either formally or informally, most of the time formally, ask for some specific feedback. We're going to talk to folks in the organization in which you work or have worked to see what, generally what kind of job you've done. At the end of the process, say you're down to the two that Shelton described, I'm going to go back and review the selection panel's notes and comments and all that. I'm probably going to also reach out to some other people who may know you or you may have worked with and do a little more, I hate to call it gut check, but just do a little more of that. And then I'm going to sleep on it, and my decision is going to be based. If you ended up in the top two, as far as I'm concerned, all the points and everything are thrown out. I'm making a decision at that point on fit and feel and what's best for my organization, the Georgia Power Company. I don't know if that's what you were looking for.
Let's go. Yeah, let's get everybody to weigh in on that. Fran, is your process any different, or do you do anything in addition to it?
I do very largely the same thing as what John does, and also Ron said it earlier. I'm also going to think about not only today, but I'm going to think about tomorrow, the next job, a year, 2 years down the line, because I'm going to ask myself, okay, where can I move this person after 2 years, after 3 years? Will this person be a good candidate for a job in another organization? Can I be effective in trying to get that person some additional experience? Because if I have two candidates and one looks really good now and is going to make a good person for the position that I just posted, but he or she is going to have a problem moving on, and the other person who came in at number two, I'm probably going to choose that number two, given everything else is equal.
Okay. Ron?
To add to both what John and Fran has said, I may have another conversation with with your current supervisor, and I'm going to talk about performance reviews, and I'm going to talk about, well, did they meet or exceed? And I'm going to say, and we're going to have, a very detailed conversation around, well, when they exceeded, what was where did you draw the bar? If they exceeded last year, did you leave the bar the same or did you raise it up? And did they still exceed expectation? So, because what that's going to do is give me an idea of drive, of initiative, of input, of wanting to excel. Because that's what I'm going to want you to do when you hire into my organization, is to excel.
Ron, when you get that feedback from a supervisor, do you give that information to the unsuccessful candidates that you interviewed? Mm-hmm. Is that part of the feedback that you give to them?
Yes. Yeah. I won't talk in a lot of detail, but I would say, something along the lines of...
Your manager said?
You need to go talk. But it will be very open and honest that, I had an opportunity to sit down and talk or have a phone conversation with your supervisor, and we talked about these things. And when we talked about performance and when we talked about exceeding expectation, these are some of the questions that I asked. And it was around, was the bar raised for you from last year to this year or the previous years, that kind of thing? Did you exceed expectations in all of those years? That kind of thing. So yes, there will be some discussion around that.
Okay, Russell?
The bottom line at the end of the day, I have goals to meet for Georgia Power as metering services. and I'm looking for ways to accomplish those goals and do them the right way. And so it is a strategic decision, and you're looking for the right fit, absolutely. And part of their history and the way they worked in the past is a really important part about whether or not I want to put that person in this role. Is because if they're not a high performer, or they're not someone that can do the job, not someone that can work with people, I don't need them on the team. It's not about being a buddy or a friend of mine or something like that to pick it. You're trying to choose the right person that'll help you meet the goals for the organization. And so in a lot of cases, people struggle with, what do you mean you're going to talk to my supervisor? But that's a very important part of the process.
Okay.
Can I add to
Yeah, of course.
to that, Shelton? I tell you, it is so critical. I tell everybody who come to me for advice, know what your manager is going to say about you before the job is posted. If the feedback comes back like Russell was saying, and that individual who applied is surprised, somebody's dropped the ball big time, because you need to know what your supervisor or manager is going to say about you at any given time that a job is posted. And typically there is a feedback form that's completed, especially for supervisory positions or managerial positions. And I stress to managers, supervisors, give those candidates a copy of that feedback so that there are no surprises. Don't be afraid that you're going to say something that's going to aggravate the candidate who's applying, because if you're communicating and doing what you're supposed to do up front, there shouldn't be any surprises with that. So I really stress that. Make sure you know what's going to be said about you.
Before?
Absolutely before.
Okay.
And let's just talk about what that looks like.
All right.
There's nothing wrong with walking up and saying, I'm interested in this job. Can you give me some feedback? Do you think I'd be a good fit for it? Talking to your supervisor. Nothing wrong with that at all. Yes. Mid-year and at the year end, you ought to have these discussions also.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with walking in and knocking on the door and saying, I've been thinking about looking at a job. What do you think about that? And those are healthy discussions that every supervisor ought to have with their employees.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the audience and see either general reaction to some of the things that you've heard so far, or a specific question. And we've got mics that are going to be brought to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Letitia Isbell, and I'm a key account manager in Metro Sales. My question is around developmental opportunities. I know we're talking specifically about the selection process, and that's kind of a spin-off, and I have been fortunate enough to be selected for a permanent developmental opportunity recently, and that can cause some heartburn with people who are in that organization who feel like, they should have been next in line for that job. How can you share some best practices around how that can be communicated in a way that it can be positively received by the rest of the organization?
Okay. Who wants to take that one?
I'll start.
Oh, I got a feeling developmental moves, we're going to be here all day.
Oh, yeah. Every position that I've had an opportunity to work around, the discussion always starts with developmental opportunity. Mm-hmm. Who will best fit into this job right now? Can we place them in that kind of thing? And should it be temporary or permanent? So that's where it all kind of starts. Let's say it that way. There are two sides of this, and you've hit on both of them. Is if you do this, then you're going to have some people not satisfied because I didn't get a chance. But the other side of it, you go through the selection process, and the candidate who has been backfilling, who has been cross-training with the employee who just left, now moves into this role. And you say, well, my goodness, why did you go through the selection process? They were the ideal candidate anyway. Mm-hmm. So there is never going to be a win-win situation out of all this, because no matter how you look at it, you're going to make one person happy, whether it's developmental or a job selection process. You're going to make one person happy, and everybody else may not be as happy. Let's say it that way. Mm-hmm. That's a guarantee. That is a guarantee. So when we start talking about developmental opportunities, we look to see the best fit and the need right now for that organization. In other words, can we put somebody in that role to fill not just a gap, but to fill that role and to hit the ground running and move on? Because there's some time constraints that are out there that we have to address. We don't have time for a learning curve. We need somebody to come in now and make it work. So those are the discussions that we have around developmental opportunities. But the key gets back to what Fran said, and all of us have been trying to say, and it is communicate. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Communicate up front what our intent will be. Communicate why we're going to do it that way versus the job selection process. And at the end, say it's going to be a developmental and the person will roll back, or it's going to be permanent. That's how and why you're seeing things happen now, that these are permanent developmental opportunities instead of 18-month temporary developmental opportunities. And you're going to see some of both, because we still have to cross-train individuals to do certain things. So, I wish I had the clear-cut answer of this is it and this is how it's always going to be, but every job is going to be different when you start talking about developmental opportunities.
Okay.
What if you were the candidate or the person that didn't get that opportunity and felt like you were next in line, or you should have gotten that same opportunity? Let me speak to that for a minute. I think if you're an employee who is interested in doing different and varied things, or interested in a particular department, don't let yourself sit there and be disappointed when somebody else comes in and gets that developmental opportunity. Because I would argue you hadn't done your part leading up to that. It's kind of like when we post a job and we don't know you, or we haven't seen you forever, but all of a sudden it's important that we need to get to know you. I'm gonna say, from the developmental or any posted job, work with your IDP, work with your supervisor, understand what your skill sets are and what you need to develop, and then what your interests are, and be working on those opportunities, all along. We can't do as many developmental opportunities as we would like, but we're going to focus on the business at hand, what we need there. We're going to focus on building bench strength. We may see something coming down the pipe that maybe somebody's going to retire or something else. And we're going to think in terms, in each one a little differently depending on what our business needs are. So in a lot of cases, it's about the business needs and who we think can fill those long term versus, you got a chance and they didn't. But I would challenge you in all of this to be diligent about your own development and take ownership of that and work all along to be ready if one of those opportunities happens to come along.
Well, John, let me push back on you a little bit. How would you respond to this?
I was expecting this.
I'm an employee in West Region. I have my IDP. I've been doing everything that has been suggested that I do on the IDP to get ready for, let's say, an area manager job. I've done all the get to knows, I've done the networking, I've done all the developmental, done the external, everything I need to do. Now, the area manager decides to retire or gets another job. But a decision is made to place someone into the role developmentally. Hey, how would you respond to me?
Difficult situation. You've done what you believe is what you should have done to put yourself in line for that job. I think you got to step back, and as harsh as this may sound, you got to step back and look at it from the corporation standpoint. We may have another individual somewhere, or we may have a need, as Ron spoke to, in that particular area manager job. I'll give you a for instance. Manchester area manager has responsibility for the West Point area and down that way where the Kia plant is. Well, 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't have a Kia plant down there. The need in the community, or the technical expertise, or whatever that we need today in that role may be different than what we needed a year ago when we started working with you on your developmental plan.
Good point.
So again, none of this is static. It's constantly changing and ongoing. Now, we need to work with Shelton if he wants to do that. He's been going along and doing all those things in his IDP. If he's focused on a job and some requirements change, you know, we need to try to develop Shelton in that area. But we may have an immediate need, or the landscape may have changed where someone else is just, again, a better candidate or has some skill set that we need at that time. It's a tough conversation.
Go ahead, Fran, you want to jump in here?
And one other thing I would tell you, Shelton, because you didn't get the job, is that you can do all of the right things. Everything you've been told, that's going to make you a great candidate. But what we have to remember is that just because we do all those things, that doesn't mean we're entitled to that job coming up next. That just puts you in a better position to be selected if the opportunity comes up. So what I would recommend and what I would tell Shelton is that be patient. Do what John said and explore the whys. It is so critical that you go to that manager and ask, you know, I've done everything you asked of me. Why didn't I get this? And don't be afraid to do that, because I, for one, want you to come and ask me why not. But please keep in mind that we're not entitled, you know, to positions, so to speak, just because we've done everything we're supposed to do. It just might not be the right opportunity and right time for you. But just be, you know, patient and be persistent.
Okay, Ron, it looks like you want to.
I agree both, but also remember that because you've had your heart set at that position located in that part of the state, there may be another one someplace else that may be a better fit for you. And you got to keep your eye. Remember, there are more than just one area manager positions in this state, in this corporation. So if you don't get one in Georgia, look at Alabama, Mississippi, and Gulf.